Hello and welcome to the Business of Betting podcast. Today I'm joined by Australian Bookmaker Kevin Saber. Kevin, thank you very much for coming on. Before we get into this episode, make sure you follow us on Twitter @BettingPod and check out the website businessofbetting.com. Guest suggestions are much appreciated. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Betfair Proprietary Limited. Betfair operates a betting exchange and is licensed in the Northern Territory of Australia. Residents of Australia can join Betfair by visiting betfair.com.au and support this podcast by using promo code BOBPOD. Please gamble responsibly. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode of the Business of Betting podcast. Today I'm joined by Australian Bookmaker Kevin Saber. Kevin, thank you very much for coming on.
Absolute pleasure, Jake. Thanks very much.
So Kevin, let's start with your background and I guess growing up in and around racing and betting and how that shaped you. Can you take us back to some of your early memories and what got you involved in this industry?
Well, I guess probably my earliest memory is wondering where my dad was nicking off to on a Saturday morning when I was 10 or 11 or 12 and come home late in the afternoon, whatever, and I eventually found out that he was working for a local SP up in East Bethlem as a part-time job. So that was he was always interested in the racing industry, passionately write down the scratchings every morning and all that sort of stuff. So that was my first interest, and I think I started going to the races when I was 16, 18, that sort of thing, and having a bit of a look around. And used to pretend to punt, you keep a little ledger when you're about 12, have $1 each one of things and see how much you won, all that sort of stuff. But I guess seriously I got involved in my mid-20s when I started working for other bookmakers as a part-time job on a Saturday.
So how do you go from a kid growing up, maybe having a bet here or there, to wanting to be a bookmaker? Or do you get kind of led into it or forced into it, for want of a better word?
I think it was a passion that I had from quite an early age, say mid-20s, early 20s, mid-20s, and it was unfulfilled until, I was, 45 probably, and probably because of circumstances. You had a family growing up and kids and mortgages and things like that, steady job. It's very hard to leave all that and take on something. That's where you have to start from the bottom up. And so ultimately I was able to do that after having a career working for other bookies and learning. And I must admit that Anthony Dowdy was he probably doesn't regard himself as my mentor, but he certainly was someone who taught me the process of bookmaking and the process of studying the form and watching videos, etc., etc. And I felt I was ready to do it. I went through a divorce and, had a sort of a free rein there. So off I went and grabbed my bookie's licence, which wasn't that easy to get, by the way. But at the same time, it's a passion more than a job for me, if you know what I mean.
So when you're getting started and you obtain your licence, what are we talking about in terms of bankroll to get started? Do you need to be pretty deep in the pockets to get started in the beginning, or can you work your way up and start with lower limits and things like that in your earlier days?
Well, you start with lower limits because you're off rails and working in the country and things like that. But you have to have a bankroll. You have to put up a guarantee through the Victorian Bookmakers Association. They have a guarantee fund so that no one can sort of jump in and walk away, so to speak, with unpaid debts. But so you've got to have a decent bankroll. But you bet within your limits, and as you maybe win and your bank grows a bit, maybe you bet within higher limits. That's how I went about it anyway.
What type of time were you putting into your business back then? Was it 10, 12, 14-hour days, or was it the high life and 4 or 5 hours a day and just, winning each week?
Yeah, well, I guess there's the odd bookmaker whose form study consists in finding out what time the first race is, but I was a bit different to that, and I'd do 3 to 4 hours form on a meeting, travel to the meeting, work there for 4 or 5 hours and travel home. So if you add that up, it's probably, 10 to 14 hours, depending on where you're going. Hard work.
How is that sustainable over a longer period of time? You've obviously done it for many years, and it seems like a lot of people.
Well, you don't do it every day. You don't do it every day, although in peak times you do it every day. But in peak times also you're not travelling as far because you're going to Flemington or Caulfield, etc. So I guess your day then is about 9 to 10 hour days, and you just get used to doing it. You get up early. I've always got up early, and into the form first thing in the morning, if not the day before, and try and do some sort of price assessment. Try and, in those days, in the early days, I had a terrific memory for just watching a race once. I could watch it at the races and remember things from the races, and you could ask me about a horse and I'd be able to tell you what it did last start and all that sort of stuff. But as you get that little bit older, the memory fades a bit, and that's not as easy these days.
So is it possible, this might be a dumb question, but is it possible to cheat a little bit as a bookmaker and cut corners and not do the form potentially for a couple of races on a day because you didn't want to put in the time? Is that, obviously if you're a bettor, you can just not place a bet on those races, but from a bookmaker's perspective, was there any shortcuts that you learned over the years?
Well, I think there's a lot of shortcuts, particularly now. I mean, jumping right ahead to 2019. I mean, Betfair and situations like that. I mean, there's many bookmakers that don't take their eyes off Betfair, and they can just operate their business based on what the prices are in the ring as against what they are in Betfair, and they might extend them by 1 or 2 points and maybe get a bet. And then if they wanted to, they can lay off on Betfair. Now, that's not my way of doing things. I'd rather have the odds on the board that I think they should be. If Betfair comes in a bit, well, I'm quite happy to match Betfair from time to time and risk my opinion against the market, so to speak.
What percentage of your colleagues were taking that type of approach, do you think?
Probably on the rails there would have been, say on the Flemington Rail Cup week, 18 or 19 bookies. I'd say 20 to 25% would be working off form study and their own markets. Others would be pure bookmakers, which the favourite would be their worst, the second favourite would be their second worst, etc. Others would be, I wouldn't say flying by the seat of their pants, but they'd be, just doing their best based on backing and laying on backing on Betfair, laying on Betfair, taking bets in the ring, and quite successfully so too. There's all sorts of ways to be successful. There's no knock on that sort of way. There's just different methods, what I've used.
Do you have a sense of which might be more profitable over the longer term?
That's a very good question because ultimately the harder you work, I believe, in any situation, the more profitable you're likely to be. But the marketplace has changed so dramatically that the on-course punters just aren't there anymore, certainly the cash punters, and it makes it very difficult for a form-based bookie or a form student bookie to actually do what he wants to do. So you may not be able to even lay horses that you don't like. So the answer to your question is that the Betfair method, if you can call it that, or the pure booking method, even that sometimes doesn't work because of inability to lay horses on course. The Betfair method seems to be the one that's more successful these days, but I think that's dying too.
And you mentioned about the hard work aspect. Do you think that can be something like just getting the volume of races and making sure you're at every race day that you can, every carnival that you can? Or are you talking about if it is a 10-race card at Flemington during the spring, you need to put in a lot of work individually on those races and individually on those horses, for example?
Well, there's a number of people that, work lots of days a week, even now. I mean, the Anthony Dowdys, the Dave McLaughlins of the world, they are the main, go-to bookmakers when it comes to working lots of meetings. Fred Watts is another one. I used to be at just as many meetings as what they were, but I've gradually given away various tracks because of their unworkability. I don't know if that's a word, but it'll have to do. Just an inability to be able to manage a book in the way you wanted to be able to take in volume of bets, holdings dropping off dramatically. So I've picked and chosen my preferred venues, and I'm sticking to that, and quite happily at the moment.
So you mentioned a little bit earlier about the process of bookmaking and things you learnt from some of those that were working around you or that came before you. Take us through sort of the key elements of your process that are critical. You mentioned you might spend 3 or 4 hours of time going through the form, but I'm sure there's many other things that you need to do to remain sharp.
Oh, yes. Well, just be aware of what's going on, aware of trainers and jockeys and strike rates and things like that. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question properly, but I have a pretty, what I call it, methodical way of doing the form. I do it by, I make sure I know what I think are relevant gear changes, relevant jockey changes. I certainly do the weights and have a look at advantages from one against the other, with all the obvious sort of stuff. I don't watch videos as much as I used to. I watch videos that I think I need to watch. There might be something in the steward's report that takes my eye, or there might be a comment in a form magazine that I might look at and say, I better have a look at that. And so all those sorts of things, they all add up to a finished product, I guess.
In terms of your more methodical approach, has that evolved much over the years? Have you added and changed different elements within that, even though it's remained pretty methodical?
I've had a piece of paper stuck up on the wall in my office that has a list of about 8 or 10 things, and I actually go through those things still every day in that order. I might have added 1 or 2, but they're the ones I know I have to do on every race, on every horse. So, and there's nothing out of the ordinary in terms of form study with those, but it's just a memory thing to make sure that I don't miss doing something and don't feel stressed about it when I get there. So, geez, I forgot to do that, or I forgot to look at this, etc., etc. So, I want to go to the races with a clear head, with a clear vision of what I want to do. It makes it a much more enjoyable day rather than have to fumble around and try and work things out when you're there, because I think it's such a time-driven industry, split seconds, etc., etc. You don't have time to make form-like decisions on the spot. You have to know what you're doing.
What do you do when you're having a bad day and you might have lost 4 of the first 5 races and you've still got 3 or 4 more to come? Is there anything you've learned over the years to able to adapt to those certain circumstances, or do you just keep it on the straight and narrow and get through race by race?
Well, certainly I've had a number of very, very good guys working for me. I won't call them clerks, because they're really guys that work with me and for me. Wayne Bent, Greg Martin, particularly Greg Martin in the last 7 to 8 years, although he's no longer with me because of other circumstances. But Greg was always one to be the calming influence. He'd say, it's only the next race. It doesn't matter about the last 5, And he's absolutely right. He was, because I might chase a little bit and he would go, what are you doing? And that sort of stuff. And before the race started, I might back it back and stuff like that. And he was, I think you need to have people working for you who understand racing. There's a lot of people at the races these days who are good keyboard operators, people working on bags who don't know anything about the races. But I think if you've got someone working for you who is a racing person, that's a great help to a bookmaker in terms of managing their emotions, if you like. If you lose on the first 4 or 5 races, it's not an easy thing to then calm and just sort of work your way back into it in the same manner as what you would normally do. I can tell you that maybe a little anecdote that you may be interested in was the Warrnambool Carnival, first day. Inevitably, the first 5 races are basically the 3 maiden hurdles. A maiden, I think it's a 3-year-old over 1,000 metres or so, or 1,100, and then there's a Vobis Gold 2-year-old race with a lot of unraised horses and not much form. So there's the first 5 races. I keep warning myself. I write notes to myself. And even Greg sent me a text message this year saying, don't forget what you said about working on the first 5 races on the first day of Warrnambool. Without going into specifics, I did my arse on the first 5 races at Warrnambool this year. So I didn't follow my own advice on that occasion, and it was extremely costly. So next year I'm putting a tattoo across my head. Don't work on the first 5 races at Warrnambool on the first day.
Well, I guess that leads me to this question in terms of, you mentioned earlier, it's a time-driven industry. There are certain days where you might have all the things in place and it, A, doesn't go your way, and B, you probably don't react or respond how you want it to. How does one refresh and revitalize and take time off when it is so time-intensive?
Yeah, when I was working, flat out, so to say, at the peak of what I was doing, I was probably working 4 to 5 minimum days a week. Family is always a good way. I mean, I was involved with the local footy club. My son played footy. I'd coached footy. I was president there for a little while. Stuff like that was all going on, and my daughters were sporty as well. And local community was always important to me. I try to get away. You play golf for 4 hours. You don't think of racing. You don't think of the stresses of it. It's not easy to do, to find the time to do that, but I think you have to find the time to relax, because otherwise you're completely intensively involved 7 days, 16 hours a day in something that is so data-driven and so intense when it comes to figures and maths, etc., that just wears you out, I guess. And I love it, and I still do, but I find it frustrating to go to the races when there's just no one there having a bet.
So do you have a preference towards the Warrnambool Carnivals, the Flemington Carnivals, or are you just as happy Wednesday Sandown type situation?
Well, I don't work at Sandown in Wednesdays anymore, and I probably haven't. I've had a licence there for quite a long time, and probably for the last 3 or 4 years of that, I probably really didn't want to be there. Just no one there, same as that. But I can go to Easter Saturday this year. I went to the Warrnambool Cup. Sounds like a very strange place for an ex-rails bookie to turn up, but it's where I was. And I went there by myself. I drove up there on Good Friday, stayed the night. Woke up feeling crook as a dog from the flu, not from alcohol. And if I hadn't have already been there, I wouldn't have even gone. I worked there 1 out, had a computer, set it all up myself, held 10,000 cash, 400 and something tickets on an eight race program, which is a lot. And there's no credit betting, just all cash. Not a lot of money. And I won $5,000. That's the sort of day I work towards and want. Not so much the winning part of it, but the fact that you've got an opportunity to lay horses and have a book that you want. So that's why I travel 5 hours to go to work.
So that sounds like a bit of a competitive nature inside of you to look forward to those days, execute on those days in a way that you had planned for, and then I'm sure the drive back was a little bit sweeter on that one.
Yeah, the night was sweet. Had a couple of beers, and the drive back the next day was beautiful. Thank you. I now work northeast Victoria. I still work at Flemington, Moonee Valley, and over the Caulfield Cup Carnival, and I've still got licences. I still work at Mornington and the Pakenhams, and not so much Pakenham, but Mornington these days. And I'm happily working at the Wodongas, the Wangaratta's, the Benellas of the world, and obviously they're close to me geographically, so it makes it that much easier. But I love working at Wodonga. I can see the racetrack from my house. I've got to know the people involved with the racing club, and I think I've got a genuine interest in Wodonga racing, which is probably becoming more important to me than the actual bookmaking these days. I just think it's a great racing club, it's a great community, and I'm probably heading a little bit more in that direction these days than wanting to grow. I could actually, because I'm so close to the border, obviously it will be Wodonga, I could apply for a New South Wales licence and work in the Southern New South Wales district or whatever not sure what it's called. Sure. The Woggers, all those places along the border that have meetings occasionally. But there's a Saturday meeting, for example, I think within an hour or two of me in New South Wales every week. So, but I went to a few just as a spectator. I went to the Holbrook Cup as a social day out, and they've got the same problem. There's 8 bookies there on Holbrook Cup Day, the biggest cup day they have for the year. In fact, I think it's the only day they have for the year. Big crowd, but no one bets. They're just there for the day out. So that doesn't attract me all that much. Always a bit of an issue because there's no one there except for Cup Day. And I think the world of betting on horse is changing dramatically. Those who don't take phone bets sort of being forced out, or on the other hand of it, just copying the backwash from those that do take the phone bets. Those that do take the phone bets have always got the issue of credit. I no longer want to have anything to do with credit betting. I've been burnt and burnt and burnt, so I'm out of credit betting. I'm interested in. I still love racing. I watch racing replays. I watch racing shows. I watch footy shows too, but I watch racing shows just out of interest more than necessarily business. So I have a passion, as I said earlier, for racing and bookmaking.
Let's talk price. Unlike bookies and totes, the Betfair exchange is a low-margin, buy-sell, fixed-odds marketplace where the value stays with the punter, not the house. Ready for the game within the game? Join betfair.com.au. Gamble responsibly.
So take me through if there's anything different in terms of your process when talking about Wodonga or Warwick Nabil versus Caulfield or the Cox Plate, for example. Is there a vast change, or is it pretty much the same process? You just different hold, different number of tickets and that type of thing?
Well, I guess, to be honest with you, Caulfield and Cox Plate are easier because the market comes out on a Wednesday. By the time I get there on a Saturday, the market's pretty much set. Those who have done the form have taken the picking of the odds. And the form study isn't as great for metropolitan meetings. It's not required by me anymore to have that level of form study that I did, say, back in 2007 or 8 or something like that. For metro. For country meetings, if you're nuts to get your head stuck into the form, you get shot down for sure. And so I spend more time studying country racing, even though it's on a lower scale than when I do metropolitan.
Take me through your clients and customers over the years. How has things changed or evolved as, time has passed? Are the behaviours and the trends generally the same? It's just, a different time for betting and betting on course?
I've had big clients, big bets. I've had betting shops, so-called corporate bookmakers betting back through me. I better not name which ones were betting back through me, but, 2 or 3 of the larger betting shops were betting back through me when I was on the rails. And we had a good relationship. We understood each other. If I would usually take their bet, sometimes I get them to hang on while I made sure I could reduce my commitment to what I wanted it to be. Credit bettors outside betting shops. There's a lot of people around who just bet. They might have big businesses. They might have small businesses. They generally bet beyond their means. Ultimately, a lot of people fail. Ultimately, a lot of people don't pay. And that's very distressing, both, I'm sure, from their point of view and my point of view. I guess my point of view particularly. I've got over 200,000 of bad debts. Makes it very, very hard.
What about the new wave of bookmakers coming through? I'm sure you're doing some mentoring, either directly or indirectly. How does the landscape look like in, I guess, 2019?
Well, that's interesting. I don't think I'm doing too much mentoring. I'm trying to fight them off more than mentoring. But there are a few coming through. They tend to be not what I would call bookmakers. They're just young people who, have some background in the sport, and maybe some family backgrounds. There's a few that, come through that are astute, and they don't tend to be provincial or country bookmakers. They tend to more want to work in the city. So, but there's in Victoria, there's a number of new bookmakers. Phil Divid is a new bookmaker who's working on the rails in Melbourne. He went into partnership with Neil Slater, who's unfortunately not very well and can't work himself. So Phil's a form student and works hard and bets big. There's others that are more Betfair driven, I guess. No one else comes to mind as being a highlight that's going to sort of the world by storm in the next 5 years.
If you were to prognosticate about the next decade of bookmaking and the business itself, what are your thoughts, or how do you think it will evolve over the next period of time with the way things are shaping up currently?
I can recall several discussions about that over the last 10 to 12 years. I think, without naming names, there was a number of rails bookmakers had a bit of a chat one day, and there was might have been a lunch, I can't remember. And I think 10 years ago we said 5 years would be all gone. 5 years ago we said 2 years would be all gone. And I'd say, look, a lot of people are there because they don't know anything else. They don't have another occupation. Others are there because that's what they've always done, and they're still good at it. And there's some stars when it comes to being good at it. Anthony Dowdy's one, David McLaughlin's one, Ed Watson's one. There's Rod Cleary. There's others. In terms of on-track bookmakers at country racecourses, I can't imagine, other than carnival times, there being even one or two at, places like Wongadonga, Wangaratta, where else? Ballarat might have two in the end. Bendigo, two at the most. Seymour might have one or two. Mornington will always have 4 or 5. But the rest, you couldn't possibly justify having any more than that number of people in the ring. And it's not the fault of the marketplace in the betting rings on track. It's the fault of, not fault, it's the wrong word. It's the inability to compete with the marketing dollars of the corporates. The corporates are able to market themselves in such a way that young people particularly are attracted to their products, the bonuses, etc., etc. But if anyone goes to an on-course track, goes to the on-course bookies these days, they'll see that our markets, our percentage of market and our market per horse, 12-horse race will have 10 horses better than the corporate over a period of the betting on a race. And that's provable. I'd really like the Victorian Bookmakers Association to publish the actual prices that bookmakers bet, say at Flemington on a Saturday, as compared to what's being produced on what's now called the VOP, the Victorian Official Price, which is taken off the corporate bookmakers. And it will prove that on-course bookmakers and the advantage of going to the track is still there, but the ability to market that information is beyond either individual bookmakers or even the Association of Bookmakers being the medium.
Is there a thought or a sense that there might have been a missed opportunity with respect to on-track? Obviously, online is trending in a very much an upward direction.
Absolutely, there's a missed opportunity because we should have as a group formed our own corporate, if you like, type bookmaker with a combined pool of bookmakers with price offerings on that site. And Best Bookies is probably the best example of that. It's run by some people in Western Australia, but something similar to that should have been formed by our own association or associations, and it's getting close to that now. I know the Australian Bookmakers Association has got something going in Sydney where I think the rails bookmakers' prices are now available online, and people can bet from their mobiles into those. That's coming into Melbourne Metro soon, and that will improve things. I doubt it'll ever get to country racing, but it's certainly something that'll prove the point that I was just making about pricing, and secondly, give the public a better idea and a better opportunity of where they can go to have a bet that may be of better value.
So in terms of racing administration, it sounds like you might even be on that path in the years to come. If you were speaking to or advising someone in that space about what the next, the 5 to 7 year plan could be or should be for let's just say a non top tier metro track, what are the types of things you expect to see in some of those longer term plans for the Wodongas of the world?
Oh, look, Wodonga of the World's actually a very well administered club, and I'm not just saying that because I know the people. I mean, they've had massive increases in their on-course attendances, particularly their Cup Day. The Cup Day this year last year in November was 9,200 people turned up. Now, that's an enormous crowd for a town of this size. It's only 20 to 25,000 people live here. It was 8,400 the year before, and before that it was about 6,000, and it's gradually increased every year. Their marquee setup was enormous. The trick is from a bookmaking and a punting point of view, is to get those people who are in those marquees not just drinking and eating and getting on their phone and betting off course. Now, there's not a financial incentive for clubs to have people betting with on-course bookmakers because they get a much bigger income out of people betting through the tote and the corporates. I'm not sure of the percentage they get of on-course tote. I'll guess it's, say, 6%. I'm not really sure, but it's around about that figure. If it's something less than that, I apologise to the country clubs. But certainly they're not getting anywhere near that, something less than 1% off on-course bookmakers. And it's therefore a disincentive to promote bookmakers on course for a financial purpose. I think the incentive should be for country and metropolitan race clubs to promote bookmakers on course, to promote attendances, because I'm absolutely sure, and people you talk to all the time, I guess I talk to people who come to the races, but they come to the races because there's on-course bookies. I was talking to some people at Flemington last Saturday. Had a very quiet day up at level 1 of the brand new grandstand there, Club Grandstand, I think it's called. Talking to a lot of people up there, and they said if there weren't bookmakers on the track, they wouldn't come. They wouldn't come and drink the champagne at $99 a bottle. They wouldn't come and drink the beer at $10 a stubby, because they don't necessarily come to have a bet with the bookmakers, but they like to have a look to see what the prices are with bookmakers, and they wander around. They like the atmosphere of the bookmaking ring. They can't imagine a race course without a bookmaker. In other words, we don't want to be like New Zealand. No one goes to races there. So I guess my offering towards the administration of racing would be to promote on-course bookmakers, not from a financial sense of income to the club, but from a sense of ensuring that attendances stay the same or increase. And there's no attempt that I'm aware of by any track at the moment to promote on-course bookmakers. Now, maybe on-course bookmakers through their association should be doing that themselves. That's not happening either. What I'd like to say is that I've got to be a bit careful what I say. The VRC is a very good and progressive race club. They've built an enormous facility there in terms of the new members' grandstand. Unfortunately, the building of that has absolutely ruined the rails. The old rails at Flemington. Jake, you'd probably remember it. You wouldn't recognise it. I don't know when was the last time we've seen it. It is disgraceful. And no atmosphere, no one in the ring. Even in Cup Week, it was so quiet. It's very, very disappointing to what's happened there. Caulfield, on the other hand, is vibrant. It's an inside ring. Cup time, if anything, it's too crowded and too busy. I don't think anyone really complains about it. But Moonee Valley Cox Plate, there's nothing like it. Cox Plate Day at Moonee Valley, no matter where you go in that track, it's busy. It's fantastic. But if you go there to a night meeting in April, where you can fire a cannon, etc. So it's about promoting, getting people to the races so that they continue to spend their dollars on whatever other products are there, alcohol, food, etc. Get them out of rooms. Don't have clubs that only promote alcohol particularly. Don't allow clubs. In other words, RBL shouldn't allow clubs to promote the alcohol only type. I've seen at least one club where their flyer for the day didn't mention the races, didn't even mention that there was racing on. Had nothing to, it was just all about the social aspect. That's very disappointing. I think I'll leave it at that.
It does sound like things have certainly shifted, and 10, 15 years ago when I would go to those Friday night Moonee Valley meetings, or even throughout the carnivals and then off-season, things are changing rapidly. With that said, if a 24, 25, 26-year-old young person said, Kevin, let's go and grab a coffee, I want to pick your brain and package up all the wisdom that you have, what are some of the things that you would share with that type of person that's looking to get into the bookmaking business or just generally getting into betting these days?
Without being too negative, I just can't see the upside of you have to start at the bottom. Very hard to work your way through to the places where they're workable, that are profitable. There's people doing it at the moment. The main way of doing it at the moment is to buy people's businesses that they're either retiring or just getting too old or just want to get out. So the main way of a young person getting in is to buy their way. What I would say is I still do believe that the same methods will work. If you work hard enough at it, whether it be form or whether it be an intense concentration on Betfair and don't miss a thing, an intense concentration on shortness on corporates, that sort of stuff, you still can mathematically make a good living out of it, because if you lay them at the right odds and back them at the right odds, or lay it back and lay, if that's what a lot of people are doing, then it's a very profitable thing to do. You have to have a mathematical mind. I've got no doubt that you couldn't do it just walking in without understanding A, racing, and B, maths, just simple maths, and be very, very quick mathematically and quick decision makers. So the advice would be consider what you're good at, consider if you've got these skills. If you've got the skills, by all means have a try, but I wouldn't give up your full-time job.
So a couple of more general questions before I let you go. And on that current theme, who's the best bookmaker you've seen over the years that you've worked with or alongside or battled against or with against the punters, and what made them so good?
I guess there's good in all sorts of ways. There's good in terms of skill. There's good in terms of courage. There's good in terms of ability to stand horses for lots of money, ability to take on particular punters, big punters. I guess just the ability to take on the big punters and the big, the really big players. You have to look at Frank Hudson, Bill Graham, Ernie Campagna more recently, Rod Cleary. In terms of just being good at the craft, the survivors are the ones that are good at the craft, the Fred Wattses, the David McLaughlins. I'm probably missing a few, but ultimately the best. And the survivor, he's been a bookmaker since he was 21. I mentioned him earlier, he was my mentor. He taught me how to do it, and he still basically does it the same way. He's Anthony Dowdy. Absolutely the best bookmaker in Victoria. And probably the most prolific. Probably goes to more meetings still than anyone else.
I hope there's a biography on Anthony coming out soon. Certainly be interested in reading it or watching the documentary. So in line with that, is there a biggest win that stands out, or the biggest loss, or the biggest bet you've accepted over the years, and something that springs to mind immediately when I ask something like that?
Oh, I guess that everyone's biggest bets is on Black Caviar. I mean, it's not the biggest stand, but I had a bloke had over 200,000 on Black Caviar one day. I think I can't remember the price, but it's somewhere around the $1.06, $1.12, something like that. So, but in terms of biggest stand, I had a bit of a theory, not a bit of a theory. I had a definite theory that the star 3-year-olds coming down from Sydney for the Spring Carnival, if they were having their first start in Caulfield at the short price, no matter who they were, was always worth a lay. And I also felt that horses, particularly from, again, certainly not from anywhere from other than Victoria, but mainly New South Wales horses, going down the straight for the first time, 3-year-olds going down the straight for the first time. So there was a horse, I think it was Exosphere was its name, it was an unbeaten 3-year-old from Sydney, going down the straight the first time over the Carnival. Was probably, I think it was I don't even know what the race is called these days, but it was a $500,000, 1,200 metre race or something like that. And it was odds on. And I think I started laying it at $1.65 and I was still trying to lay it at $1.90. I was top odds the whole way through, and it was just one of those things where I thought I was right, and I think I ran a lovely fourth. So that was good.
Yeah, I remember that. That was, I think it was Japanisme. It was the horse, one of Waller's horses probably, who ended up winning.
Yes. You've got me there. It was probably about 20 to 1. I can't recall laying it. Yeah.
Yep. No, it makes sense.
I think I got the lot. It was one of those days where I think it's VRC Derby Day the same day. I've got to make sure I got the right day.
Yeah, I think it's the Coolmore down the straight.
Yeah. And I also recall that the very first, I'm pretty sure it's the same year, I'm not sure, I'm 100% sure it's the same year. Now I come to think it's not, but there was a horse in the Carbine Club Stakes that was $1.50, and I'd marked it $3.50, so it was a significant incentive to stand it. And I tried to get every dollar I could out of that, and I think I stood it for about 40,000. So I got about 80,000 out of it, roughly. And anyway, it was never going to win, and in fact was gone and dropped back to wherever, and don't know how, but got up and wanted a photo. So it was not a great straight start to the carnival that day, but in the end, that week was the biggest week in terms of winning I ever had. So maybe I just put my head down and got it right. So there were several good carnivals, but I've probably sounded very negative about bookmaking, but the fact was it's been very, very good to me in my life. I mean, we've travelled extensively. We've loved it. We've loved the camaraderie. We've loved the people we've met. A lot of great friends who I've met through racing. And look, that still remains. I mean, we love going to the races socially. But the fact of the matter is that the racing and bookmaking has been very good to me. And I should be making sure I say that, because financially, I mean, if I had stayed working doing what I was doing, I couldn't possibly have made as much money over a period of time as what I did bookmaking. So you've got to be proud of that. But on the other hand, as I think I mentioned in the little note I wrote to you, I mean, the last 3 to 5 years have been not great, and it's very, very difficult. I mean, I don't think I made a profit for 3 years in a row there, so it makes life pretty difficult, because I wasn't really good at saving money. I was pretty good at spending it. Yeah, so anyway, life goes on.
And one last one for you. Besides the usual Black Caviar Winks and even probably pre-Maccabi Diva, is there any horse or horses that stand out as the best you'd seen over that period of time?
I've always said to people that the best horse I ever saw live was Might and Power. That year when he won the Caulfield Cup and the Melbourne Cup, they were two of the best performances I've ever seen. And I had cottoned on to him a little bit before that time, and I just loved to look at the horse. He's just a magnificent looking horse and just a terrific galloper. He was the best horse I've seen live, leaving aside Black Caviar Winks, etc. I went to, and so Might and Power's the answer to your question. I went to Ascot on a whim, at a last minute decision, just the year that Black Caviar won over there, and that was a terrific experience, because there was pretty common knowledge that she wasn't 100% right, and for her to do what she did on the day, even though she only just won, she probably didn't show the world, and particularly the UK people, just how good she was. But bottom line was she still won, and she still won their biggest sprint race. So she was fantastic.
Thanks, Kevin. That's some great insights, and I guess a long career in the industry, and I'm sure many more years to come. I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast.
I certainly hope there's many more years to come. Thanks very much, Jay.